Adding cameras to your scene can add a lot of interest and movement, and also depth to the scene. And what we're going to do here is have a look at the basics of working with cameras. If you want to follow along, we're in Cameras AEP, and I'm going to be in O2 Cameras Composition. You can find that project in the Introduction to 3D folder. So at the moment I have my little characters in here and I have a little bit of animation on these extruded layers. And what I want to do now is just add a camera to that. So I'm going to go to Layer, New, Camera. And when I do that, a new dialog box comes up, my camera settings dialog box. And if I know what camera I'm looking for, I can choose a preset. I'm going to choose the default 50mm preset and click OK. And when I do, you won't notice much difference in my active camera view. But if we move over here to my custom view and have a look around, and specifically if I zoom out a little bit, so I'm going to switch to my camera tool, which allows me just to move that view so that we can see the camera and the elements within the scene. So basically this pyramid here represents the field of view, and if we move that across a little bit more, at the end of the field of view you'll actually see this little box that is the camera itself. So that represents the camera, and then this triangle that extends from it represents field of view. Now just to make moving around a little bit quicker, make sure you've got fast draft on when you're working in this view, and you should be able to see that work quite nicely. So basically anything that falls within this pyramid is visible to the camera in this view. Anything that exists outside on the edges here won't be visible in that view. So for example, if I was to move this element here out to the side, you'll notice now if I select the camera, it's actually outside the camera. So I can clearly see in this view what's visible and what's not when I have the camera selected. Okay. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to have a look at how to control the camera, and there are a couple of ways of controlling it. First of all, let's open up the camera and see what options we have. Now you have zoom options, depth of field, focus distance, and then all these settings for aperture and iris shape for the depth of field. We'll have a look at those later. We also have transform properties, and the transform properties for a camera are slightly different to other layers. You'll notice that we have something called a point of interest. And this thing here is the point of interest. And if I drag that around, you'll notice that determines what the camera points at. And so whatever I'm pointing at with the point of interest will be in the center of the comp. And you can use that in lots of different views. So we could go to the top view, make sure our point of interest is at the correct focal plane. So we want it round about in the middle. Then we can switch to our front view, and then just decide which character we want to drag the point of interest onto. So by animating the point of interest, we could just keep the camera in one place and then decide what the camera is looking at by animating the point of interest. So let's do that. So we'll set a keyframe there, and then we're going to move ahead. I'm going to zoom out from this view using my camera tools. So I'll use the unified camera tool, right button just to zoom out. Now, if you find it difficult to select the point of interest here, you can also scrub the values down in the timeline just as you would anything else. So we could scrub that across, and then if necessary, switch to our selection tool and just manually drag it. And you'll notice it creates a path just like anything else in After Effects. So I could animate that path and adjust it to create a curve. And now if we go to this view and make sure we're previewing that by clicking on Always Preview This View, and we'll just do a quick RAM preview of that. You'll notice now the camera stays where it is, but starts pointing at different elements within the shot. So that's one way of animating a camera. That's a little bit of a fast camera move, but you get the idea of how it works. But we're not going to go with that. We're going to close up that camera and switch it off. And you'll notice when we switch it off, the view resets, and we're going to create another camera. And this time, we're going to choose a different lens size. I'm going to choose a 15mm lens, which gives us an extreme wide angle, which is quite nice for projects like this where you have a lot of 3D. Now, the other thing we can do is actually move the camera itself. And you'll see by moving it down, I create that kind of hero camera look, where everything looks gigantic compared to the camera. And of course, I can animate the camera as well. So if we go back to our top view, and I'm just going to zoom out again using my unified camera tool, you can see now the wide angle, and that's why it's called wide angle, because it creates a very wide view, a wide field of view for the camera. So if we don't want to animate the point of interest, what do we do? Well, we can animate the camera. And there's a couple of ways of doing that. We can actually physically move the camera by clicking and dragging on the axes. Now you'll notice when I do that, the point of interest moves with it. And that's great if you just want to do a camera move that kind of keeping the camera parallel to the scene, if you like. But sometimes what I want to do is I want to move the camera but keep the point of interest where it is, so we create a much more extreme angle. And to do that, what I'm doing is holding down the Command key when I'm dragging. So I can do that. I can start off with an angle like that, maybe not quite as extreme. And this time, I'm going to open up the position property of the camera, set a keyframe for that, move to the end, and then either scrub the position value, because scrubbing the position value will move it without the point of interest. Or if you want to do it up here, you need to drag it and hold down the Command key to move it to your new position. And of course, we can also look at that from front view, make any adjustments if we want the camera to be from above at this point. Again, we can drag it, but holding down the point of interest. So we're doing a camera move from above to below and from left to right. Now again, if I preview that, we'll get a rough idea of how that works. Okay. So you can animate the camera, you can animate the point of interest. We also saw earlier how you can create nulls to create cameras and create all sorts of different moves for cameras. So that's a little bit about animating cameras. Now, another thing that you can do is when you've animated a camera, and let's just make that a little bit less extreme. So let's pull that in a little bit. Whoops, wrong way. So we'll do a slight camera move from here. Not quite as extreme. Let's pull that camera back down again. Again, holding down the Command key or Control key on Windows to keep the point of interest where it is. And we're going to adjust the position. And I think what we'll do is zoom in a little bit as well. Now, actually, we're not zooming in, we're panning in. So when you adjust the position value to move closer, we're actually creating a pan. Okay, so say we've got something like that. Now you'll notice that as the camera moves over here, it kind of gives away the fact that these layers are 2D and not 3D, because we start to see the edges of them as we move around. There's a little shortcut that can help you with that. When you've animated a camera, what you can do to kind of fake the fact that these layers are 2D is select the layers, and in this view, go to Layer, Transform, Auto Orient, and we can ask the layers to orient towards the camera. And now when we click OK, whoops, I've got the wrong layer selected. Just make sure you've got the correct layer selected. So we're selecting the hip hop dancers, and we're going to Layer, Transform, Auto Orient, and we'll say Orient towards camera. And now you'll see that the layers face the camera. So as the camera moves round, they turn to face it. And if we have a look at that from the top view, you'll be able to see that happening in this view as well. Let me just select those layers and scrub through so you can see them turning to face the camera. And by doing that, we kind of remove that kind of 2D look and make it look as if those characters really do exist in 3D space. So that's a little trick to make characters follow the camera as they're moving throughout a scene. Now there's a couple of shortcuts for cameras as well. If you're in a view, so say we go to Custom View 2 or Custom View 3 even. Okay, let's just move this view a little bit so we can't see some of the characters. So I'm going to move it around that way and then just move it down a little bit so that a couple of the characters have gone off out of the scene. So if I select this character, which is over here somewhere, and I very quickly want the camera to focus on her, instead of having to mess around with the camera tool, what I can go to View, Look at Selected Layers. and the camera will automatically look at that layer. And then if I want to, I can also say view, look at all layers. And that will extend the camera to look at all layers. And when you actually have a camera in your comp, what you can do is select the camera and use the camera tools in this view to actually move the camera around. So if I'm to open up my transform property group, watch what happens. If I click and drag with my orbit tool, notice the position values are changing. So you have to be a bit careful you don't do that accidentally in this view. Incidentally, if we don't have a camera and I try and use the camera tools in here, it doesn't work. But as soon as you have a camera available, when you use these tools, it will make adjustments. So you can actually use this to animate, so you can just roughly get the view where you want it by using the camera orbit tools. And then I would set keyframes for everything, just in case. Or what you can do is say auto keyframe. So if I click on auto keyframe and I make an adjustment, it will automatically add a keyframe to the property I need it to. And then we can move to the end and just move that around to the view that we want at the end. And again, it's creating a keyframe. And if I move out and maybe just move the view up or down, it will create whatever keyframes I need created. So that's a way of automatically animating the camera by using the camera tools to set up the animation instead. Now there is one other way that we can do it, okay, which is in this view to say, okay, maybe what we want to do is focus on one of the layers in particular. So I could select, say, this character here, or one of the ones in the distance, maybe that one there. And I could say view, look at selected layers, and it will focus on that woman. And then I can go up to my camera. Again, I should have left auto keyframe on. So let's just do that again. View, look at all layers. Open up our camera settings. And then move to the end. And we'll say select that girl. Which one was it? We'll select that one and we'll say view, look at selected layers. So it now goes from a wide shot into a close-up of my selected character. So a few different options for animating cameras. I really like this one because it finds the quickest way really of getting from one shot to another. So use the camera tools to set up your animation or just to control your views in the multiple views.